You're at risk for a cybersecurity breach. Yes, you as the rancher. Hey, I'm Shaye, and I host the Casual Cattle Conversations podcast. Folks, today we are visiting with Chris Sherman from techsupport.farm, and he specializes in helping farmers and ranchers basically be set up for success from a cybersecurity standpoint. A lot of what we're going to talk about today is we talk about running things like a business, but running things like a business means having tech systems and cybersecurity in place like other businesses too. Because as farmers and ranchers, let's be real, we're transferring a lot of money back and forth, even if our margins are slim. So Chris is really going to dive into a lot of what that looks like. He's going to provide some actionable steps. He's going to provide some real examples of things that have happened to family operations or even cooperatives. And it's really a great episode. I joked with him that after I listened to it, it made me want to lock my doors, like my digital doors, if that were possible. And it's not about feeling scared of the hackers or anything like that. It's really about being upfront and open and honest about some of the digital threats that are there and making sure that your family farm or ranch is protected so that you can pass it down to the next generation. Remember that this podcast is also available on YouTube as well. So with that, let's visit with Chris. If you are like most ranchers, you've got a lot going on, from checking cows to fixing fence to keeping up with the weather, and somewhere in there, trying to remember all of the details about your herd. That's where CattleMax comes in. It's the most widely used cattle management software in North America, built by ranchers who understand how work actually gets done. So whether you're in the pasture, the pickup, or back at the house, your records are organized, up-to-date, and easy to use. Start your 21-day trial at cattlemax.com/start or schedule an online demo to see how it works for you. Chris, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to visit with you today because cybersecurity is something that I have only discussed with my paid membership group, Rancher Minds, but I really think it's important to be having these conversations with the broader population, but especially farmers and ranchers. So thanks again for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So to kick it off, tell us why cybersecurity is so important for farmers and ranchers to understand.
That's really kind of a complex question, and I think that what we need to understand is what cybercriminals are after. And from, a cybersecurity perspective, cybercrime is targeting finance, it's targeting information, and then it's also targeting disruption of services. And so you go all the way back to, any warfare or any sort of conflict, and the first thing that people go after in times of war is the enemy's food supply. If you can choke off water and food, without that, you really don't have a government, right? And it forces that. But in a peacetime thing, ag is a major target because of the money that's going through it, the information that we're using, and just some of the things that we as an industry have that are very unique compared to the rest of the world. Ag is a $1.5 trillion industry in the United States. There's a tremendous amount of capital going through it. The other thing is that there's approximately 2 million farms in the United States. Compared to other small businesses, there is just a vast amount of farms that are at the bottom of the industry pyramid, and the average farm has more liquidity than the normal small business. So normal mom and pop small businesses might have $50,000 in the bank. They might have $100,000 tied up in equipment or assets. But in the farm, we're averaging about $500,000 in just liquidity, in just the average checking account. We have well over $1 million tied up in infrastructure and equipment and the tools and that sort of thing. CISA, which is the cybersecurity agency for the United States, named ag as one of the top 16 critical infrastructure industries. So in relation to national security, ag is one of our top things that we have to protect, along with public utilities and that sort of thing. But when we're talking about agriculture as why it's unique and what makes it different, there's like 5 different key problems that we run into ag compared to anybody else. Number one is our rapid adoption of technology. In agriculture, we are constantly bringing new products, new services, and new solutions to the marketplace. And the challenge is that they are solving problems. They're solving real world problems for us, but we're not thinking about security when we bring those to the market. And so this lack of security by design is really leaving farmers and ranchers vulnerable. And so products and solutions that we use every day, we need to be really mindful of the fact that, that they may not have the security that we need to keep your farm safe and keep people from hacking into those. The other challenge that we run into is what I call the culture of trust, or the keys in the visor mentality. And everybody's going to get this. It's that concept that, when we pull into the yard, we leave the keys in the service truck. It can be in the ignition, it can be in the gas cap, the visor, it doesn't matter. But it's this idea that we allow our trust, kind of that whole industry mindset of we're very friendly, we're very trusting. We allow that to seep over into our digital experience. And so, I always use the example of Johnson Farms Wi-Fi is probably Johnson Farms, and their password is probably Johnson Farms with an exclamation point on it. And they keep adding one on every time they're prompted to, change the password. And so the thing is that we have to really start thinking about cybersecurity and where we're at. Kind of like when you're out in the country, it may not be so important to lock your doors. But when you're in the big city, you're not going to just leave your vehicle running at the gas station while you go inside and get a coffee. And so we have to be mindful of the fact that when we're on the internet, we're kind of in the big city and it's not safe anymore, and we have to be a lot more vigilant. The other thing that's really unique to ag is the transition that we're going through. Agriculture, given the amount of money that's invested in assets, land, all of the equipment, and that sort of thing, we're having a lot more of a challenge transitioning from one generation to the next. Normal American small businesses, they either sell off the business, they auction it off, or they pass it on to their kids, and it's no big deal. But agriculture, we're seeing a lot of struggles with that. And so what that's led to is older generations hanging around the farm and actually playing a responsibility. So you'll see grandpas and uncles and aunts and that are actually having a role on the farm, and they still control the spending. And unfortunately, the older demographic is far more susceptible to financial fraud than any other demographic. Last but not least would be the infrastructure. For some reason, we have the best equipment, we're out there using the best technology, but for some reason we're running our offices and we're running our back-end operations on residential grade hardware. Every farmer is proud of the fact that he got his laptop at Best Buy as a clearance from 2 years ago, and he only spent $300 on it. And that's great, but that's consumer grade hardware. It doesn't have the same cybersecurity practice or same cybersecurity software and features. We're doing it with our infrastructure. Our routers. We just run to Walmart and we grab ourselves a Netgear router, or we grab ourselves, whatever. But essentially, we're running multi-million-dollar operations on residential grade hardware, and it doesn't make sense. You would not feel good if your bank was doing the same thing, right? You wouldn't feel good if your doctor's office was running their stuff on clearance items that they got from Best Buy or Walmart. And so we need to really be cognizant of that, and we need to start investing some time and money into increasing and beefing up our security and the hardware that we're using for computers and networks. So
there is a lot we can and will unpack with everything you said there, but I think this is a whole different perspective of, in agriculture, there's really been this push and reminder of run it like a business, run it like a business, run it like a business. But this is the first time I'm hearing someone say that from the cybersecurity standpoint. And even a lot, like you said, the consumer grade hardware for laptops, Wi-Fi, stuff like that. I've never heard that before.
Okay, and here's a crazy thought. The FBI came out last week, I think it was, or maybe the week before, with a list of routers in the United States for internet routers, right? You just pick them up wherever, that have spy software on them, have spyware embedded in the routers. And they gave us a list of the models. They gave, and Netgear's on there, TP-Link is on there. Any of the common ones, those are made overseas. They have foreign software that was embedded in there, and they're spying on you. And so it's very important that we're aware of that. And then also, this goes beyond just routers, right? This goes into security cameras, your blink cameras, your ring cameras, all of that. You got to ask yourself where that data is stored. Who has access to that data? How difficult is it to access that data? I would not, just go out haphazardly and just grab, Arlo's or whatever camera system that you're doing and just throw those up, because they actually have access to your network. And it's not just that they can see and watch your family and your farm, right? They have access inside of your network now because it is a network device.
Okay. Now, remind listeners what your background is or your role in cybersecurity today. How are you helping farmers and ranchers with your business or job?
My background is kind of mixed. I started out in ag when I was like 11. I got my first job at the dairy farm down the road. And so, just ride your bike over at 3 o'clock in the morning and milk cows and go back at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and that rigmarole. I went out and I got my, degrees, and I took over an ag construction company. So I think for like 10, 12 years, I went and ran a company that we did grain sites, irrigation systems, that sort of thing, and a lot of the, ag construction stuff. When I was doing that, it was on about the time that we really started to see a lot of the automation coming together. And so it was being able to monitor your bins and the dryers, and then being able to turn your irrigators on and off. And we were starting to see a little bit of dairy robotics coming into the market. I think this was early 2012, 2014. And I asked some of the engineers at a particular company that had a solution. I said, what are you going to do if somebody hacks into this? And they kind of laughed at me and told me that would never happen. Nobody's going to want to get into this. And then we've actually started seeing that slowly start happening. And there's a couple different areas that we're most concerned about in cyber attacks. But it was definitely what we call industrial control system attacks that really piqued my interest, because the problem is that just because you have access to your irrigation system or you have access to your dryers, so does your dealer, right? Your dealer now has access to yours, and they have access to your neighbors and all of their customers. And then you go further up the food chain, and now the engineers have access to thousands of customers. And so all of this tiered access and who has access and who forgot to revoke access, that all becomes liabilities to us further down the line. So I think it was 2022, I started this company and Tech Support Farm, and our goal is to provide IT and cybersecurity services to agriculture. And our mission is to make sure that the infrastructure that all of your solutions live on and all of your technology works on, we want to make sure that it's operating well, and we want to make sure that it's safe and secure.
You brought up what would happen if someone hacked into the dairy. I think about breed associations on the beef side and all the information that's there, DNA companies. I mean, there's so much information. Those are just examples that come to my mind, but there could be so many others.
RFID tag swapping, taking more valuable animals and swapping their tag numbers so it goes to market and it comes up as a less valuable animal. This is all really, really new, and it's very fringe, and we haven't seen it so much. We're seeing a lot more in more of the automation side of things, whether it's grain management or herd management, especially dairy robotics. Those are the big ones. But the rest of that, it's all coming online. The other thing that I think is important for everybody to understand is basic cybersecurity. Okay, email, bank accounts, all of our data that we're sharing back and forth is very susceptible. And one of the things, like the biggest thing that we look at right now, is email addresses. We have way too many guys that are running around using Gmails, Yahoos, AOLs. All of these email addresses are consumer grade. Okay, they're not encrypted.
What about Outlook?
Outlook is no, because that's a branch of Hotmail. What people need to be doing is they need to be getting commercial grade emails with their own domain. So it can be xyzfarm.com. Get your email and then put filtration software on there, and then make sure that your stuff is getting encrypted on the way out. Because people need to think about emails like mailboxes. Okay? A Gmail or a Yahoo or an AOL or a Hotmail or any of those free ones are kind of like a mailbox on the side of the road. Anybody can open the mail, anybody can see it, they can stick it back in the envelope, send it on, and nobody will ever know the difference. So anything that you're sending to your banker, anything you're sending to your insurance agent, NRCS, whomever, all of these are not encrypted. And so your personal information is getting out there. The other thing, just to kind of circle all the way around as to why ag is unique, as an industry, we are maybe one of the less regulated industries. We really encourage people in the United States to get the job done in ag, but at the same time, we're one of the most transparent industries. And people don't really stop and think about what that means. A great example is the H-2A program, okay? If you go out and you're looking for help, maybe get some South Africans or people from Mexico or wherever, and you go and you put that job listing on the H-2A site, we're putting our personal email addresses on there. We're putting our personal home addresses on there. We're putting our cell numbers on there. And what's interesting is the people that are on those sites and applying for jobs, a lot of them aren't applying for jobs. They're looking for personal information. Because you can also cross-reference on the USDA's database, and you can figure out which farms had what subsidies. And you can see the subsidy list from 10 years ago. And you can figure out which farms are making the most money. And then you go to H2A, and now you pull together basically a personal information profile. And then we see attacks happening all the time that way. And so attacks would look like maybe they identify your bulk fuel dealer in your area, and they start sending out invoices to you telling you that you need to hurry up and pay, and they're spoofing that dealer. Or we've even seen where some of our customers, they might have a custom harvest operation or a custom spray operation, and they're using their own Gmail as sending out invoices, and they didn't know that they had spyware in there. They got their customer role, and they started invoicing their customers, and they're being very, very strategic about it. They're doing it exactly at the right peak time, whether it's calving or planting, spraying, and they push them to make that payment automatically. And what is the one thing that we do in ag worse than anybody? We just take care of it, we pay it, and we'll deal with it later. And by the time later comes, then it's already done and over with. It's gone.
Are horn flies stressing your cattle? Make fly control one and done with Alticid IGR XRB. Alticid IGR XRB delivers season-long horn fly control from a single application bolus, providing up to 195 days of relief, regardless of mineral consumption or location. It breaks the horn fly life cycle with no impact on beneficial insects, giving you flexible, consistent control. Learn more at cargillanimalnutrition.com/Alticid bolus, and that link will be in the description.
What are some other examples that you've seen? If you have some ranch-specific ones, that would be nice, or just farm ones in general. I know I've heard you on other podcasts and you've had some examples, but I think we're used to like the spam emails and texts saying your toll road is, or you went through a toll road, you have a payment due, etc., or whatever that may be, or some of those generic ones that are easy, right? But what are some of those other bigger ones that you have seen happen to the family farm?
Okay, so a very ag-specific one that actually caught the federal government's attention happened over in Mankato, Minnesota. I think it was like 2 years ago. I think it was Spring Valley Cooperative. And essentially what happened was the entire cooperative was held with ransomware. And they shut them down. And it was what really caught everybody's attention was they shut them down first week of harvest. And so they had trucks, they had hundreds of trucks backed up waiting, and it shut down their scales. They couldn't write tickets, they couldn't pay invoices. Employees couldn't even check in, and clock in. And so had that happened in like February or January, nobody would have cared. It would have been a little blip, we're down for a couple days, no big deal. But they chose to do it right at the beginning of harvest. They knew what they were doing, and it was very, very orchestrated and very well planned. That's a high level thing, right? That's the kind of thing that catches the federal government's attention. What's not catching the federal government's attention is things like we've seen where dad and the sons are working on a land deal. They're going to go and pick up a couple quarter sections. They're working with a bank. They're talking with their insurance companies. They're talking, they're back and forth, and they're working on this deal. And dad didn't know that he had spyware on his computer. And somebody's been sitting there reading his emails. And they know what's happening. They know who all the players are in this. And so what did? They spoofed the bank. and they sent me e-sign documents. And they did it specifically right before Dad and the boys are headed up to Lake of the Woods for the weekend, and they're going to go fishing, Thursday through Sunday. And so Dad gets it on a Wednesday, and he rushes the boys to hurry up and sign, and everybody goes and signs their papers. They jump in the truck, they take off for the weekend, they come back, and they find out that not only did they lose the money, they lost the land deal as well. These are real world examples of things that happen. We've had ones where marketing companies have gotten multiple invoices from multiple vendors that they use, and they pay their invoices. Come to find out that the person was in their computer system, they knew who their vendors were, they copied their invoices and just resent them back to them. And they paid. And when we're talking about this, we're talking to the tune of $60,000, $70,000 invoices. When we're looking at this whole problem with agriculture, it boils down to the fact that this is a big payday for them. Most small businesses are not seeing $100,000 transactions go through their accounts every day. And for agriculture, it's really not that uncommon. And we see that happen all the time. And our banks have become, as vigilant as they're trying to be, our banks are very accustomed to seeing those kinds of transactions go through. So it doesn't throw up any red flags for them.
Absolutely. My husband and I were actually just talking about that because we had sold some grain and got some checks, and I was like, isn't it funny how some people would only make this much within a year's salary, but here it is. And he goes, but isn't it funny how, we're going to spend that much or more the next day or whatever it might be. So,
and that's really the dichotomy of agriculture right now, is that yes, there is so much money that goes through it, and yet the profit margins may not always reflect that.
Absolutely. So, Chris, I want to get into the action steps that farmers and ranchers can take. You already talked about getting that domain and then getting an email, and folks, buying a domain is cheap. I want to say mine was $20 a year or something like that. Maybe it's 50 now. I don't even think it's that much, but it's a very affordable thing to do, to get a domain and have a paid email, all of those things. What other action steps are you encouraging producers to take?
So number one is when you get the domain, then you have to turn around and just set up the email. And emails can be set up typically, if you get it through GoDaddy, don't use GoDaddy's email service, right? It costs way more than it should. You can set it up through Microsoft, or you can set it up through Google. Both of them have business suites, and both of them have security measures built into them. I would highly recommend doing that. Ultimately, you're going to probably spend about $200 to $300 a year on an email address. It's not the end of the world. And for the guys that, have the old AOL that they've had for the past 25 years, I mean, it's great to collect antiques, but now what we do is we start forwarding those emails out of there. You just go to the forwarding email, you forward all of your old emails so that they keep going through that old account, and then they get filtered as they come into your new account. And then as you reply from that email, it's just like forwarding your mail at a post office. Eventually everybody forgets the AOL, and then you just start using the new one. You shut the old AOL down, or whatever it is that you're using. The other thing that I would talk about is passwords. Passwords and multi-factor authentication and those kinds of things are so incredibly critical. I don't think people realize that if you use a password that is all letters, it can be 12 characters long. That password can be hacked almost instantaneously. If you put numbers inside of it, your password will go from being hacked instantaneously to, I think it's 7 minutes it takes. If you add numbers and special characters in upper and lowercase, it becomes into the years that it takes to hack it. And so really our recommendation is to have passwords that are a minimum of 12 characters long, have a couple uppercase and lowercase letters in there, make sure you have some numbers in there and some special characters. And the only thing we say is don't repeat the special characters. Okay? And the concept behind that is Johnson Farms Wi-Fi, and you keep adding an exclamation point to the end of it. Because eventually somebody's going to figure out what the game plan is, and they can hack it a lot easier. But passwords are the keys to the lock, right? And it does not make any sense to be having your bank or your JD Ops or your Climate Field View or any of these highly sensitive, cloud platforms secured with a little luggage key lock, right? You need to be really mindful of what you're protecting and put a proper password on there accordingly. And so in going to even things like social media, you know, a lot of agriculture is doing their marketing on social media. And so if you have like a farm store, or if you do, there's any number of applications where you've built up a really good, you know, following on Facebook or maybe YouTube or whatever. Those platforms are so ridiculously hard to get back if you ever get it hacked. And so it is so imperative that you make sure that those platforms you're using, multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication, make sure your passwords are really good. Go into their security and privacy settings. Look at what devices you have logged in, right? If you don't recognize those devices, every now and then it's not the worst idea in the world to log everybody out and start fresh, right?
So I've got a question there. What about, you're talking about the social media, and you also talked about free emails. A lot of times when I go to create an account somewhere, it says, do you want to connect it to your Gmail? It's for easy login. Does that put you at greater risk for hacking if you connect it to that free email for a login?
No, not necessarily. It's really the opposite of, do you want that account to have access to your Gmail? Okay. And so, for instance, like, you know, you see those quizzes on Facebook, or you see those apps on Facebook that you click on and they're like, hey, do you want to log in with your Gmail or whatever? You're actually giving them access to your data. And so that's the part I would advise against. Now, if you're logging into Amazon, or you're logging into something and you're using your Gmail as that point of logging in, then it's not that big of a deal. If it's a trustworthy source, that, you know, a reputable source, I'm not against it. What I am against is some of these platforms where you're basically giving away access to your private data. And people need to realize how much is actually collected on those platforms. On your Apple account and your Gmail account, those are the top two things I would protect. I would make sure that people don't realize you can go to Google and you can click on My Timeline and it will show you exactly where you've been. It knows how many steps you've taken. I mean, think about that. It knows how much time you sit in a car. It knows how much time you've spent flying. It knows everywhere you've been and what you're doing. Do you really want the rest of the world to have access to that? You know? But from a farming perspective, especially from a marketing perspective, if you have a good following built up on any of those social media platforms, protect that. That's very, very important. If you're just, you know, the normal guy that just uses it for Facebook Marketplace, it's kind of throwaway. It's not that big of a deal. But we have to be able to assess our risk and determine what is most important to protect. The other thing, you know, is cell phones and computers. I can't tell you the number of farms that I show up at where nobody has passwords on their cell phones and their computers. I don't understand why we're doing this. Like, I understand that it's kind of a pain to log into your phone every time, but seriously, would you just leave your wallet sitting out on the bar when you go to the bathroom? No. You'd protect it. You'd make sure that it's safe. But we have to think about that. What does your phone hold? It's got all your pictures, all your emails, all your bank access. Maybe you're using, you know, Apple Wallet or Google Wallet or whatever. I mean, the amount of access, why are you leaving that phone unlocked? And your computers, same thing. People don't realize that a lot of the applications that we're using for ag, whether it's, you know, herd management systems or irrigation or some of these things, they all require something called port forwarding. And port forwarding is basically an open door from the internet to your device. Okay? And so if you're using that to gain access, if you're basically logging back into your computer remotely and you don't have a password, you know, basically there's an address on the internet that goes directly to your computer and there's no lock now. If they can figure out what the IP address is, and there's no password, it's a screen door to the internet. And so it's kind of a disaster.
All right. So no free emails. Make sure you got passwords. What other action steps?
The other things that I would be really mindful of is emails and understanding what to be looking for in a spam email. Or not even a spam, but a phishing email. Look at your sender. There's three parts to an email. There's the header, the body, and the footer. And the header is going to tell you the most information out there. Always look at who's sending the email. Even if it just says, you know, let's just say that it's CoBank or something like that, right? It could be anybody, but just pulling that one out of thin air. You can hover your mouse over it and it will then tell you, it will show you what the actual email address is, right? And they may have misspelled bank and they might have swapped out the A with an E. And so they're spoofing them. And that's a great dead giveaway as to something like that. The other thing to look at is the time that the email was sent. Just look at the timestamp. And we've seen far too many government agency emails that showed up at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'm sorry, but customer service and federal government employees are not working at 2 o'clock in the morning. Those are telltale signs, right? The other thing is that if you get attachments inside of your email, your PDFs are the biggest purveyor of spyware and malware on the internet right now. Don't just go randomly opening PDFs and links, okay? Hyperlinks, and those are the pieces of text inside of an email that turn blue, and you click on it and it takes you to somewhere in the internet. People need to understand that there's two parts to that. There's the label that's on top that you see, and so it might say that it's going to USDA.com or USDA.gov. But if you hover your mouse over it, it will actually send you or it'll show you the destination link. And most times, if it's a phishing attack, it's not going to where you think it's going. So always hover over that link and be checking and double checking before you actually click. If you are not expecting an email from this particular place, do not open those PDFs. If you click on the little drop down menu, it will actually show you. It gives you a preview option. And you can look at what's inside the PDF and determine whether it's safe to open or not.
NovaGraze herbicide is a groundbreaking weed control solution that enables cattle producers to preserve white clover and control many broadleaf weeds at the same time. Only one product can make this claim. That's NovaGraze. So why is this important? When it comes to your operation, grass is your lowest cost feed source. For every pound of weeds you eliminate, you get back up to 1.5 pounds of grass. Learn more at rangeandpasture.com/cattle conversations, and that link
When
is in the
I
description.
used to work for a ag tech startup, we were funded by a bank, so then we were required to have certain antivirus softwares, VPNs on our computers, etc. I've also heard that those don't actually work. So what's your take on it? Is there something producers can do to protect their personal devices with something like that?
Yeah. So that's a good question, because cybersecurity is no longer McAfee. It's no longer Norton antivirus, right? And VPNs have a very specific role, and they're not necessarily the be-all, end-all for cybersecurity. Cybersecurity needs to be thought about like home security. Okay, back in the 70s and 80s, our home security systems might have been a front porch light, a deadbolt, a shotgun, and a dog, right? Mm-hmm. And that's basically all you needed. But as time has evolved, our home security systems have turned into security cameras and floodlights, and, some pump alarms and backup generators and all these different things, right? And so the question becomes, what tools are applicable to your operation? Okay, a guy living in a double wide trailer is not going to need a sump pump alarm, and somebody out in the country is not going to need bars on their windows and doors. And so what we do as a company is we will help customers, identify what their needs are inside of their operation, and we will help them determine what tools they need. But the basic ones is everybody should have antivirus, everybody should have some form of anti-malware. And then what we also offer is we offer endpoint detection and response, which is really kind of like the security camera of your system, and it monitors who's been in and out and kind of keeps tabs on that. So in the event that there is an attack, we can figure out how to best remediate that. The other one that we have is called managed detection and response. And that's really kind of 24/7 monitoring of the activity on your computer. It's not watching specifically what you're doing, but it's watching for anomalies. And so a good example would be is 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe you just randomly logged into your bank account and decided that now's the time to do wire transfers. It's going to catch something like that, and it's going to lock your computer down, and it's going to verify with you that you're actually who you say you are, and that you should be doing those kinds of things. It's really the security guard for your network, and I would highly recommend that. So there's other softwares out there too. Mobile device management is huge. And what's really important about things like mobile device management is for, and it doesn't matter if it's ranchers or row crop or whatever. There's applications out there that we use, and we hand over access to some of those apps to our employees. Okay. And yet sometimes our employees, they fall off the wagon. They're not, necessarily going to be with us forever. And we really don't have a good, effective way of revoking that access. And so what mobile device management does is it partitions off a little piece of their phone, and you tell it that you want them to have access to JD Ops, or you want them to have access to T-Sheets, or whatever, Monday.com or whatever. And then once they leave, you can take back that digital key to the business, so to speak, and you send us a text, and we automatically revoke it, and we take those off of there for you. So those kinds of things, and device security is huge.
Chris, there's so much here that you're bringing up examples that I didn't even think about. I mean, something like that. So another maybe rabbit hole question is, I've been told in the past to never put TikTok on your personal device or phone because there's cybersecurity threats within that mobile app. Are there apps that are more prone to bringing in threats like that on personal devices?
The problem is that everybody is susceptible to attacks like that through their platforms. Whether it's, Snapchat or TikTok, your banking app can also have that too. Really, I think that what's most important is to make sure that those applications are secure and you're not downloading applications that you've never heard of before. Okay? If you go into, the Play Store, or you go onto, Apple Store or whatever it is, and you're looking at those apps, look at their credibility rating. Apple apps are probably going to be a little bit more safer because Apple is far more stringent about who they let into their marketplace. But from an Android and a Google perspective, I would be very careful. Look at how many people have actually downloaded it, verify that it's actually been, is reputable before you just go downloading it. The other thing that I would talk about is Wi-Fi. We need to really have a serious conversation about who we're letting onto our Wi-Fi. And so things that I really kind of bring up would be segmenting your Wi-Fi so that you have Wi-Fi specifically for your farm operation, and then you have Wi-Fi for your kids and employees. Just like kids coming home from school with, and they're covered in germs all over their hands, kids are the same way digitally. The games that they're downloading and the stuff that they're getting into, keep that away from your business, because those are perfect gateways. Things that I would stay away from, especially would be like Roblox, or some of these other creator-based games where actually users are getting in there. That is a nefarious gateway that is way too, prevalent, and we see way too many people getting in there.
Chris, we have covered a lot today, a lot of valuable information, a lot of things that kind of, I want to say make me feel like I want to lock my doors, but lock my digital doors, I guess. So if there's one thing you want producers to take away from this conversation, what is that?
Okay, so one thing that I would say is Tech Support Farm made a tool. It's called Fence Check, and it's finding the holes in your cybersecurity defense, right? Kind of a play on words. Mm-hmm. But basically what guys do is you can just go to our website, it's techsupport.farm, and you click on Fence Check, and it walks through your entire operation. It asks you what kind of software you're using, what kinds of technology you're using, how your operation is set up, and then it will go through and within 48 hours, it spits out a custom thing for you and shows you actionable steps that you can take to beef up your operation. The other thing is that we also are able to provide you risk scores, like security scores on some of the stuff that you're using, and maybe, what platforms and stuff you should kind of get away from. So Fence Check is a great place to start in figuring out best ways to, have some actionable steps to improve your security posture.
All right. Well, folks, if you're listening to this podcast, we will include that link in the description. Remember, the best way to support this podcast and all your other favorite podcasts is to leave a rating or review, and better yet, share it with a friend who's going to find this information valuable. Because believe it or not, podcasts still grow best by word of mouth. With that, happy ranching, folks, and Chris, thanks for hopping on.